he was going to inspect our company, and boy, they shined their boots, and oh boy, we was ready. And then it was raining, and he sent word down that it was raining. He didn't want. Well, hell, we was ready for inspection, so we didn't get to see him either.
He was talking about the camera that he, and so here were some, I don't know if you can zero in on those or not, but if
Can you
that's-
hold it up higher?
the light, is it fairly good?
I don't know. There, oh yeah, I can see that picture.
Yeah. Although the war was over, we still had our full field inspection.
Yeah.
And some of his group had this, things all laid out, and then they were doing exercises in the middle picture, and then down here at the bottom sometimes we played basketball, and then
Back up.
and then there's some of their guys that were setting up a play there for basketball. But he has this book full of a lot of nice pictures.
And everybody was off in the evening except those that had misbehaved a little bit, and they were on KP, Kitchen Police.
Did some of them try to butter you up?
Oh, sure.
Looks like you had a lot of artists in the group too. There's a
Well,
lot
that one artist, and I don't know whether he got killed or not. He drew our pictures, and he didn't charge. He was just there with a big gun, you know, and he knew how to. But I never did hear from him, so I don't know whether he survived the war or not. His name was Carlson.
You don't know where he was from.
No, I don't know. I always wondered. See,
These
those-
days, the veterans have a website on the computer where you can go and look up people.
Well, somebody suggested they could look him up.
Uh-huh.
I got his name is signed on the picture.
Yeah.
That's all I know. And I know when he took that picture, first thing he drew my head, and then he put my ears on, and
He did a
he
wonderful
knew what he was
job.
doing.
Made you look like a movie star.
Yeah, he did.
Did you ever have a battle where you thought that you weren't going to come back? Many times?
All I can say is that I consider myself a pretty lucky guy. In the first place, I was lucky that I wasn't on D-Day. That was, casualties were terrible.
Right.
But then I was just lucky because, you know, the big artillery shells had come in, and it might land 10 feet away from you, but it's amazing. Everybody carried a shovel, a little short-handed shovel, and you had it on your belt. And whenever you stopped, well, you dug your foxhole, and it's amazing how much a foxhole would save your life from those big artillery shells. Yeah, it was a matter of luck, that's what it was. And our captain survived the whole war till the last week.
And what happened to him?
Well, he was in the Jeep, and you know, we were moving so fast, and you know, a Jeep is not really a combat vehicle. And there was a machine gun nest that was hidden in the woods, and it killed him and the driver both. Yeah, that was too bad. But the survival was just a matter of luck, that's all I can say.
Did you have a time when you could go to church or anything, or
Well,
did you have a?
each regiment had a chaplain, and the chaplain, one chaplain would be a Protestant, and there's 3 regiments in a division, and one chaplain would be a Protestant, and one would be a Catholic, and then maybe Jewish or something else. And then if you were off the line, why, then you could go over to that other regiment and go to service if they had one. But we all had chaplains. And they were valuable people. It wasn't just church. I mean, you know, some of these soldiers were homesick, and we all were as far as that goes. They'd talk to them, you know, and kind of keep them straight. And then some would hear from the girlfriend that got married at home. They call them the Dear John letters.
Yeah.
And then there's some guys that whenever you had an army camp, why they had women followers, and you didn't want to marry them kind. Some guys did too,
Oh, excuse me.
but it wasn't my job to tell them.
Yes, that's true.
I don't think it affected
Okay, what we're gonna do is,
go home. Okay, when the war was over, well then, different soldiers had points. They got so many points for time spent in the army, and also how much they was on the front line, and maybe if they had a wound or some medals, well that counted. And the ones with high points got to go home. And when they went home, they left the division. They had camps in France, and they called them cigarette camps. They just named, that was just a name they gave them to, like Chesterfield and Philip Morris, and those were camps where you'd go, and then as soon as they had a ship in the port, well, then you'd load on there and go home. And it took me 2-3 months before they had a ship that I could, because we had so many people there.
so what cigarette camp were you on?
I think I was at Philip Morris, but they was on that. That's just the
Yeah,
nickname
sure.
they gave them.
Sure, yeah,
Yeah, that's what it
Yeah.
was. Yeah.
oh, that's interesting.
Do you have a lot of copies of your books, or are these your only
Well, I've
ones?
given them to all my relatives, and I got a call from he said he was a nephew of my captain that was killed, and he was born
Oh.
after he was killed, and somebody had told him, so I sent him a book.
Oh,
I haven't
wonderful.
heard from him yet. Carol Bigham works for me, you know. She sent it,
Huh.
and the captain is mentioned in my book quite a bit.
Uh-huh.
He was a good captain, and it was just a shame that he survived the war. One battle, after the battle, he said, "Norman, look at my helmet." And a bullet, a sniper, had aimed at him and hit his helmet, and the bullet glanced up and went, you know, we had helmet liners underneath our helmets. The helmet liner fit on our head, and then the helmet went over the helmet liner. And it tore some pictures he had glued in the helmet liner, but, and grazed his hair.
Oh.
Now that's getting close.
Very close.
Yes, sir.
Oh, that nephew should treasure that book. That
Yeah,
should
and
be a
that
wonderful
nephew-
thing to
that
have.
nephew, his mother was a sister of this captain, and he was named after Dan. That was his name,
Oh.
and he was born after his uncle was killed, and I guess he hadn't called me, so I got his phone number.
How long ago has that been?
That was just here last month. Yeah. Well, he went to one of the reunions that we had, like he was asking, and he had met one guy that had gotten my book, and he said, "Kruse's got a book. You better try to get one. It tells about your uncle." And it does. There's Captain Moore was just the first lieutenant when I joined it, and then he was promoted. The first captain, I think they told me, was killed the first in the invasion before I joined them. It was, the way I look at it, it was just a matter of luck. That's all it was.
Or were there some other Kansas boys that you had?
I run into one. He lived in western Kansas. He was in a different platoon, and then he got wounded, and I never really got acquainted with him.
Oh, okay.
But there wasn't any more in my platoon for some reason. It just didn't happen that way. I had quite a few from Delaware and Pennsylvania, and I don't know, just all over the country.
Right.
But I was lucky when I was here in the States. All I had to do was get to Kansas City, and you know that train would run from Kansas City at midnight at the station and get in Waterville at 6 o'clock in the morning.
Oh.
And then every night he'd leave at midnight and get in Kansas City in the morning. So all I had to do was get to Kansas City, and I didn't need no car. I'd get on the train and I'd be in Waterville the next morning.
Did your mom ever share with you any of the things that the families back home did for the war effort?
Yeah, on one Christmas in some place I got copies of it. She invited the Geyers and my cousin Hormans, and I think there was 17 of them. They all wrote me a letter the same day. So I had kind of a record, and I had one letter that had 17 letters in it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Did they make victory gardens or anything like that?
Well, I don't know. We always had a big garden.
Okay.
And you know, we always, when we went to grade school, see, there was 5 of us boys. We always milked 12, 15 cows. Well, then each one gave a bucket full. Well, then you had 10 buckets to skim milk in the morning and 10 buckets. Dad always raised hogs. He wasn't going to throw away that skim milk. And hogs just love skim milk. So we always had cream checks. We also put up ice on Coon Creek every year. We had a cave, a cyclone cave near the barn. I guess old timers had built one just in case of a cyclone. And we had always ice up till September. So we always had we couldn't use the ice in the tea, but we could make ice cream with it and keep the cream. And they always had a cream check, and we always raised 30, 40 bushel potatoes, and we raised all kinds of tomatoes. My mom always made tomato juice, you know, that's good juice. And she canned a lot of tomatoes too.
Now your farm, where is it in relationship to Charles Steele's?
We're just south, we're just join them on the south.
Oh, okay.
You go to Steele's and it's the first farm south,
Okay.
going west. And the dad used to give directions. His relatives would come visit. You go to Waterville and you go west till the first road that goes south. That's where Comps lived, I don't know if you know. And just follow the road and don't ever cross Coon Creek, Big Coon. So as you go to Detmer and you can go south and you cross the creek, well then back up and then go around the hill, and pretty soon you go by Steele's, and then you go on too far and you cross it over there and then back up, and then that's our place.
Okay.
Just don't cross Coon Creek.
Were you aware of any of the WPA projects? Did any of your family work on any of those projects?
Which project?
The WPA.
Oh,
Yeah.
like hauling rock for the roads and.
Or
No, they didn't. I know some neighbor boys worked with they had camps, Triple C boys, and I think part of their wages went to their parents. Yeah, Marysville had one, and they done conservation work. That was the beginning of conservation work. Those camps were over with when I started working for the conservation department. Yeah, they were scattered all over. Yeah, that was when times were tough, you know what I mean? Nobody had jobs and the crops burned up, and you know, wheat was 25 cents a bushel or something.
What were your meals like when you were over fighting? Did you get any fresh fruits and vegetables and stuff, or was it all?
Well, when the Army could, once in a while you'd get steak, and you heard of the K-ration? That's a little box and done in cellophane, and it had a can of, they called it Spam, and that was kind of meat. And then they had some hard crackers in there, you know, and then a candy bar, which is just solid chocolate, you know. And it had everything in. The dietitians had probably already, so that it was healthy. And we had pockets, we could stick 2, 3 in our jackets, enough for a day or two. And then But if, usually our kitchen had a stove in the truck, and they could cook stuff, and if the battle wasn't too hot, well, they could bring food up to us after the battle was over. Otherwise, we lived on K rations. But you really couldn't complain about the food, really. It was healthy.
Was your water supply pretty
Well,
good?
they brought water up, and they had to put chlorine in it, and they said, don't drink any water. Those old countries, you know, they just had urinated, and their toilets were outside, you know what I mean? And if you went into a restaurant, they always had this dry wine, you know,
Oh,
and that went with the meal. They never served water. But when we had water, they always had enough chlorine in it to keep you healthy. But you got used to drinking that chlorine water. But they just wanted to be sure, and you didn't let your men drink water any place. And even after the war, the French, unless they had bottled water. The German army had bottled water, so they knew too. Yeah, those old countries, you know, people been living there for thousands of years, and the soil is kind of saturated.
sure.
But they never, you know, while I was there, they never had any tourists yet. That came a little bit later. But I always planned to go back, but now that I can't see, well, no need of thinking about it. In our road, it seemed like the aisle was on the edge of it, and then you could have kind of a private place where you sit, you know what I mean? See, our aisle goes through the middle of the train, the ones I rode in.
Why were you on a train to go
That
on?
was after the war was over, when I went on those 3-day passes. The war was over then. I was in Germany, and I'd get on a train a few times and go to Paris. That's the only time I rode a train.
Did you pick up some German?